UFC 257, Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor II. Big card, definitely a big card. A lot of people have been waiting for this one. The return of Conor McGregor, and it's the return of boxing MMA picks. I go by the name of Harris. Of course, I have Zan with me as well. And we're here to give you our picks for UFC 257. We're here to tell you which fights do we feel good about, which fights to possibly avoid. And the idea here is to make you some money. Now, of course, before we get into the main event, Poirier versus McGregor, we have to get into our prelims. And before we get into the final fight of the prelims, which is Arman Tsarukyan, my fault, versus Nasrat Haqparast, we have to get into fight number one. So let's get into this. Our early prelim fight, Amir Albazi versus Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I'm going to start with Zhumagulov on this one. I mean, a decent UFC debut. I saw some decent stand-up out of him, boxing, kickboxing. Pretty effective jab, I would say, especially for a debut in the UFC. I did see some grappling wrestling out of him. I'll give him some takedown credit as well. We know that that's an area that he likes. And he'll use a pretty decent stand-up to set that up. I like his movement. He's a southpaw, so that always is going to work in your favor more times than not. One thing about him I noticed is that he fights a lot off of that back foot. So it's going to look like he's retreating. It's going to make it a little bit easy to apply pressure on him. So, you know, that might fare in the eyes of the judges. I think to beat Zhumagulov, you got to be faster than him, you got to be stronger than him, or you got to apply more pressure. And when we look at Amir Albazi, I see him checking a lot of those boxes. So we see this fight at 125 pounds. Amir Albazi has competed at 135 in the past. I feel that Albazi has better boxing, definitely better boxing, maybe better overall stand-up, but definitely the better boxing. And I like the wrestling that Albazi has to offer. And I've seen some jits out of him as well. So I think Albazi is going to be a little bit too much. It's interesting to see him as the plus 100 underdog on this one, because I actually feel pretty confident in Amir Albazi winning this fight. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think this is a really close fight. These guys were scheduled before, and then something happened. So today's the day, or this weekend's when they're gonna redo the fight. This is a really close fight. I look at Albazi, where what I see from Albazi is really good jiu-jitsu. High-level jiu-jitsu is what I see. I believe Zhalgas has the better stand-up. Zhalgas being from Kazakhstan, so he has to have some type of wrestling defense as well. Just fighting around those areas, Eastern, like just out there, you got to learn how to wrestle, because a lot of the fighters coming up know wrestling. So I hear you're saying, I get what you're saying, where Albazi is definitely a live dog, and I think this is a close fight. I personally am not betting this fight, because I think this is a 50-50 fight. Looking at Albazi, though, the level of fighters he has been fighting up until now, I believe Zhalgas has fought the tougher competition.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he fought. And I like his pace. I like how he keeps the pace up for 3 rounds. I'm going to coin flip. I'm going to go with Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I'm gonna take him to take Albazi. I believe I believe he has the better stand-up. I believe he's gonna carry I believe he has cardio. He's just gonna keep fighting. First round, second round, third round, he's gonna still be in there, trying to take this guy's head off. So, and he has some knockouts. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Zhalgas here. I think he can stuff some of Albazi's takedowns, keep this on the feet, and I think if it stays on the feet, I think eventually he's gonna get to Albazi. But again, I think this is a 50-50 fight. I am not betting this fight.
Yeah, two very important points that you mentioned there is the takedown defense and the cardio. I can absolutely see both of those playing a factor in this fight. I'm still going to go with Amir Albazi, but I absolutely see why you would go with Zhumagulov on this one. So listeners, definitely, take that as you may. Let's move on to fight number 2. We have Nick Lentz versus Movsar Evloev. Minus 500 for Movsar Evloev, I think with good reason. I'm going to let you call this one, because this one's, I feel pretty good about Evloev.
Yeah. One sec. Okay, so I'll be honest. This fight, I think Evloev is better everywhere. I think at this point in Nick Lentz's career. I believe Evloev, as the fight goes on, is going to have the better wrestling as well. I think this fight stays standing, and I think Evloev is just going to piece him up. I think this Evloev, the odds are too low, but I think this is a safe parlay piece to include in some parlays. But yeah, I like Evloev. I think this is as close as you can get to a lock. You can't call it a lock, but I think this is pretty close to it.
Yeah, and something to look out for the listeners, of course. Nick Lentz, we know, is going to rely on wrestling, although I don't feel he uses it enough. We saw Movsar Evloev go up against Mike Grundy in a pretty tough fight, a pretty big guy in Mike Grundy, and he was able to stuff those takedowns, at least, as the fight was progressing. So I think that becomes a blueprint for feeling safe about Evloev. I think Mike Grundy would beat Nick Lentz today. So yeah, I mean, to your point, this is as close as you get to a lock, minus 500 for a reason. I'm going to go with Evloev as well.
Grundy was supposed to fight Nick Lentz, but something happened. So now Evloev, this fight, I believe, was created for that reason.
That's
like Grundy was scheduled for Lentz. Yeah, so that's funny.
Interesting. Let's move on to fight number 3 in that case. Last fight of the early prelims. We have Andrew Sanchez versus Makhmud Muradov. Now, this one's an interesting fight. When I look at Andrew Sanchez, I mean, I see a pretty strong clinch from him, pretty strong wrestling. He likes to keep you on the cage, dirty boxing, knees in the clinch, that type of fighter. In the stand-up, he gives you his best impression of Lyoto Machida, of course, with that karate-like style. Moves pretty decent with it, though, I will say. Stays pretty light on his feet, has some pretty good movement around the cage. Not mad at his karate style at all. And very willing to engage. He's willing to take 2 shots to give back 3, willing to eat 3 to give you 1 harder one. But a very sneaky combo that he has that I've seen from him. He likes to set that up, especially with the inside leg kick. That said, I'm still going to go with Makhmud Muradov on this one. I mean, you have a fighter that's on a 13-fight win streak, pretty light on his feet. You want to talk about ability to do stand-up and ability to box. He's part of the Mayweather team as far as I'm aware. I don't know if he's still on the team, but I know he was at one point. Pretty light on his feet, like I said. I mean, a lot of movement around the ring. I feel like his pace is going to be too much for Andrew Sanchez in terms of his movement. A lot of feints, a lot of fakes. Really likes to pick his shot, gives you a good pace, a lot of 1-2s. He can pop you, move in, move out, 3 or 4 hit combo, move in, move out. I like a lot. I like a lot of what I'm seeing from Makhmud. And, I mean, he's pretty dynamic in the striking as well. Of course, Sanchez, being the older, more experienced fighter, he has probably faced stiffer competition. But I feel like you can't really beat Muradov unless you pressure him. I don't think Sanchez is going to be able to do that because I think Makhmud Muradov's movement is going to be too good around the cage. I think him picking his shots is going to be too good as well. I do feel pretty good about Muradov despite how tough of a challenger Andrew Sanchez is on this. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I feel what you're saying. I think this is a really close fight. I think this is pretty close to, it's not 50-50, but I think Sanchez definitely has a path to win this fight. I believe he's the better grappler, the better wrestler. So he can definitely look good. I think he's going to look good at the beginning of the fight. I think he's going to have success. One thing about Sanchez, though, his cardio doesn't hold up when he has that heavy wrestling approach. And I think in this fight, he's going to have to win with a heavy wrestling approach. So some fights he comes in, he wrestles, strikes, he kind of mixes it up, wrestles for a bit, and then he'll strike for a couple minutes. In this fight, I think he has to wrestle the whole way. And I think if that happens, I think the cardio is going to hit him. And I think at the end of the first round or even beginning of the second, I think that's when Muradov is just going to kind of run away with this fight. Again, I think Sanchez has a real good shot with that wrestling to win this fight. But I believe Muradov, he's a more well-rounded fighter, more weapons. I think he should be able to survive that round. Not say survive, because again, Sanchez has the wrestling. If Sanchez could win that first round, but I think Muradov, as the fight goes on, is going to win because Sanchez's cardio does not keep up. And yeah, look, Tapology's with us, so I'm going to go with Muradov here to win this fight. And I think I'm looking at like a decision.
Yeah,
but I'm just taking the win. I don't bet outcomes. So when I say knockout decision, don't run, make that bet, because I personally don't bet the specific outcomes of these bets. I bet winner or loser. If I feel good, I might bet knockout or submission or whatever, right? But usually 90% of the time, I go with winner or loser. So I
Great
got mirrored up.
disclaimer. Yeah, great disclaimer, because again, we are, if we're talking about seeing a certain style of win, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're saying bet on that. We just pick the winners, right? So let's continue picking winners here. I mean, we both have Muradov on that fight. Let's move on to fight number 4. Khalil Rountree Jr. versus Marcin Prachnio. I'm going to start with Prachnio. I mean, he's 0-3 in the UFC. I'll start with that. That's very important to note. He stays on the outside. I mean, he likes to attack the calf with that back leg, a pretty leg-heavy attack. But I have seen it nullified if you kind of put pressure on him. Southpaw, but orthodox, I'll say, but he'll switch stance. And I saw a kind of questionable chin on him. And that's going to be interesting fighting Khalil Rountree Jr. because as a southpaw, we've seen how Khalil has, I'm not going to say transformed himself, but we see how he has now much more of a pure, in some ways, Muay Thai stance in his approach. Pretty quick, pretty heavy, explosive striker, as we've always known Khalil Rountree to be. What I like about his game at this point, a very effective calf kick game plan. And we see, I mean, for the past year, 2 years maybe, in the UFC, that is a style or a strategy that we can't really beat it right now. So I like the fact that Rountree uses it. He'll definitely use it over and over again. We've seen it in his last fight. That being said, we know a huge weakness about Khalil Rountree Jr. is that he can be taken down pretty much whenever you want. He can be controlled on the cage. Opponents have a very clear path to victory when you're facing Khalil Rountree Jr. It's going to be interesting. I mean, we see Rountree lose to these guys who are a little bit more explosive or a little bit more aggressive, even someone a little unpredictable in some ways. I'm thinking Ion Cutelaba. I'm thinking Johnny Walker. And what I'm thinking is that Prachnio is not that, right? So I like Rountree here. I think Rountree probably knocks him out, or some sort of TKO in some fashion because he's chopping that leg to pieces. How do you feel about this one?
Man, I'm with you 100% on this fight. This is going to be a striking match, I believe. I think it's going to stay on the feet. Rountree is too dynamic. He went to Thailand to learn some more weapons. Like he's more dangerous now. I know he lost to Ion Cutelaba, but if you've seen how he looked once he came back from Thailand, he was a different striker than what the UFC was used to seeing him as. He lost to Ion Cutelaba, that's okay, but this is a different fight. Funny stat: Sam Alvey got one takedown on one person in the UFC. Sam Alvey has one takedown in the UFC against one person, against Prachnio. You know what I mean? So Sam Alvey doesn't go for takedowns, and he got, out of all of his fights, and Sam Alvey has fought in the UFC many, many times. He doesn't take no one down. The only guy he was able to take down was this guy. So I don't know what to say about that, but I'm going to go with our boy. I'm going to take Khalil Rountree. I know he said he's going to retire after this fight, so that's a bit concerning when people say this is my retirement fight or my last fight. And so we don't really know where their head's at. But just going off the skills, and Marcin can't take shots well. Khalil's not the best either, but I believe Khalil's more durable, and he also has the better offensive weapon. So, yeah, I like Khalil here to win this fight. Knockout.
Agreed. Let's move on to fight number 5. This is what I felt was probably one of the harder fights to call on this preliminary card. We have Julianna Peña. This is a women's bantamweight match. Julianna Peña versus Sara McMann. Peña is the plus 105 underdog. McMann is the slight favorite at minus 125. I mean, where do I start with this fight? Julianna Peña, or let me start with McMann. I mean, veteran, as we know, 40 years old at this point. We know what her game plan is, and her game plan is, I want to take this fight to the ground. She's going to do the level change. She's going to grab the single. She's going to complete the takedown, take control on top, improve her position, get that arm triangle choke, smother you, and try to win the round. Very strong grappling, strong chain wrestling as well. I will say her stand-up, in my opinion, is serviceable. That's probably the word I'll use. It's serviceable, although she'll usually be at the disadvantage, in my opinion. Her feet are flat. Her movement is not amazing. Striking defense is okay at times, but without good movement, you see why I just say it's okay. We've seen her exposed in the past when she's on her back, so that's very interesting. It's not like she's just, at the advantage when the fight's on the ground in any position. She has to be on top for her to really be in an advantageous position on the ground. When it comes to Julianna Peña, I mean, her stand-up is kind of basic, in my opinion. A lot of fakes, a lot of feints in her stand-up. She tries to use it to find the timing. I think she has some decent distance control on the feet as well. Pretty sturdy base. I noticed she's flat-footed. That's going to be interesting to see how that impacts the approach to this fight, and then to see whether or not Sara McMann will be able to take her down because she likes to clinch. I mean, she has a pretty strong clinch. We saw her control Germaine de Randamie at times in their fight, and pretty often in that fight with, like I said, the clinch, the knees against the cage, that type of dirty boxing approach, but more of a Muay Thai type of approach in that clinch scenario, and very willing to engage. And that's always something that's important to note when fighters are willing to take two hits to give two hits. This one I found really hard to pick a winner in a confident fashion. I think McMann has a path to victory. We saw that fight with Nico Montano. She was able to control Julianna Peña. I can see Sara McMann pretty much doing the same things. Even though Peña won that fight, I can see McMann doing the same things to Peña in a more dominant fashion. And we know to beat her, your stand-up has to be significantly better, or you have to have that ability to stuff the takedown. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not Peña can do that, because we know she has a clinch game, but I wasn't able to really study much in terms of her ground game. If I were to make a bold prediction, I would say Sara McMann wins via arm triangle. If I were to make kind of just a general prediction, reluctantly, I will say Sara McMann probably wins this fight.
Yeah, I'm actually siding with you on this fight. Again, this fight, before I even say that, this fight is a really close fight. So, because we have to factor in Sara McMann is 40 years old. Julianna Peña is the younger girl, the younger fighter. One thing with Julianna Peña, though, I don't think, personally, with the eye test, I don't think she's the same fighter she was before she left. I think she had a child, and she took up 2 years off MMA. And that was so when she lost to Shevchenko, and then she didn't fight again. She fought Shevchenko January 28, 2017. And then didn't fight again until she fought Nico Montano, 2019, July 13. So that was because she had her kid. So she didn't fight for 2.5 years, let's say. And then she fought Nico Montano. And then she won a unanimous decision where Nico started off really good. And then Peña got in the groove and was able to squeak out a win, right? I think if that fighter that fought Nico that day, I think Sara beats that girl. And I think the Julianna Peña that fought Germaine de Randamie, I think Sara McMann beats that girl too. And when I look at Sara McMann, I know she's 40 years old, but her fight against Lina Länsberg, I know Lina Länsberg isn't the best fighter, but Lina Länsberg gets wins. She's 10-5 in the UFC. She beat Macy Chasen, Tanya Ebinger, Gina Mazzani, Lucy Pudlova. So she's definitely a fighter that has some pretty good wins in the UFC. And she was able to make easy work of her, and that was her last fight. So, again, I think this fight can go any way. I personally, I'm not betting this fight. I might take a shot with Sara McMann, but I'm personally not betting this fight. I'm not putting on any parlays. But if I have to make a pick, I got to go with Sara. I think her wrestling is better. I think she's stronger, and I think she is more fit. Peña she looked a little different than what I was used to, because I followed her since The Ultimate Fighter. And she was good. She was pretty quick. She moved around nice. She moved around okay, and she was ruthless. She seems a bit slower. Like she missed something happened. I don't know what it is, but she's not the same Peña that I was used to. I like Sara to win this fight.
Yeah, but like you said, I mean, close fight.
really close
probably
fight.
not going to bet on it, or maybe a last second bet depending on how they look walking into the arena.
Agree, man.
All right, let's go on to fight number 6, second last fight of our prelim card. We have Brad Tavares versus Antônio Carlos Jr. Let's hear your take on this to start this one off.
Yeah, this is a really good fight. We got a pure jiu-jitsu fighter in Antônio Carlos Jr. Versus a pretty well-rounded fighter in Brad Tavares. Brad Tavares wants to keep this fight on the feet. He wants to strike. He has a really good hook. Antônio wants to get that single leg. He wants to drag you to the ground where it's his world. It's a different game once he gets to the ground. He's one of the best. He's definitely top 7 in the UFC of all weight classes in pure jiu-jitsu. His level's that high. His last fight, he lost to Uriah Hall. A fight he arguably won, but it was a close fight. It was a close fight, but Uriah Hall won that fight. Carlos got a bit tired as the fight went on. He lost to Ian Heinisch, who just beat him down. His cardio again failed him. I like Brad Tavares in this spot. I know Brad Tavares is on a 2-fight losing streak as well. He lost to Edmund Shabazian and Israel Adesanya, but that Adesanya fight, I believe he got the first round, but that's arguable. That was a close first round. Israel probably won that round, but on one judge's card, I believe one judge gave Brad that round. So, but it's a different fight than Adesanya. He has to shrug off the takedowns. This is Brad Tavares. He's never been submitted in the UFC. I think this fight can go any way because think about it. One guy has the path, get this to the ground. He's way better. Brad keeps us on his feet, avoids the submissions, or even if he gets on the ground, get back up because we know Carlos's cardio is going to fail him again. And if he can avoid the submissions, knock him out, that's his path to win this fight. So I think both guys can win this. This is another fight that I got to be careful if I'm betting on. I'm going to take Brad Tavares being the more well-rounded fighter. He's never been submitted. Carlos couldn't submit Uriah Hall either. So I think if he doesn't get the submission, he's going to be in another war. So I'm going to go with Brad to win that war.
Yeah, this one's going to be extremely interesting because in a lot of ways, I can't pick a winner in any confident fashion either. I think, you mentioned a lot of good things about Brad Tavares. And I mean, at the end of the day, we definitely have to acknowledge the competition that he's faced. I mean, you see, 6 or 7 losses on his record, but you see 3 of them, including Yoel Romero, Whitaker, and Adesanya. And you say, okay, I kind of get it. That kind of makes sense. And to your point with Antônio Carlos Jr., runs out of steam in some ways, right? I mean, we saw Uriah Hall, who is typically a slow starter, able to pull that victory out, although to your point, arguable win, right? I think it's going to be whether or not Antônio Carlos Jr. can apply that sort of smothering style that wins him rounds. Can he take Tavares down? I don't necessarily think it's going to be reliant on a submission. I think it's going to be more reliant on whether or not Brad Tavares can get back up. I think this is one of those fights. I mean, if we really want to talk about it, these are one of those fights you probably should bet live as it's happening because I want to see what that first takedown attempt looks like with Carlos Jr. His stand-up is kind of awkward in some ways. Very bad very bad striking defense, in my opinion. Kind of just gets hit over and over again. But willing to engage, willing to put on a war, willing to come forward, put the pressure on you, take you down, get you against the cage, trip you by any means. So it's going to be very interesting to see, can Brad Tavares pick him apart? Can he stuff the takedown? Or will Antônio Carlos Jr. sort of implement his smothering style?
Let me give you a stat. Let me give you a quick stat. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
Antônio Carlos Jr. takedown accuracy 44%, and that is in all his UFC fights. He's fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 fights in the UFC. 44% takedown accuracy, and he goes for takedowns pretty much every fight. That's his only way to fight. Brad Tavares has a 77% takedown defense. And we're basing that off of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 fights.
Wow.
Well, he's been tested. Okay, but go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. I just found that stat, so I just wanted to Get that in.
That's actually the perfect stat, because I was about to say I can see Antonio Carlos Jr. probably implementing his style. But when you tell me that after 18 fights, I'm changing that. I'm changing my pick live on the spot, live in this video. I am going to slightly lean in favor of Brad Tavares for that very reason. That's a very important stat, without a doubt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you got to factor in as well. He's 77%, and one guy named Yoel Romero, silver medalist in the Olympics, got 7 takedowns on him.
Yikes.
So even though Yoel, who this guy doesn't have takedowns like Yoel, even though Yoel has got 7 on him, he still has a 77% takedown defense. That's crazy. You would
wow.
Like one guy like ruined his stats. If he didn't fight Yoel, he'd probably be at like what, 80, 90? Like, come on. Oh my God. Let's see.
Interesting stat. That's probably the golden stat of the week at this point.
Yo, that's all live, man. That was all live, which is happy. That was freestyle, man. I like that.
There you go.
Real stats, man. All right, let's go.
There you go. We have your best interests at heart. Let's move on to our final fight of the prelims. We have Arman Tsarukyan. I'm forgetting that name. I don't know why. Arman versus Nasrat Haqparast. Interesting fight. I will kind of provide some analysis on this. What I saw from Arman, I'm going to stick to Arman and Nasrat, keep it simple. What I saw from Arman was really good stand-up, good boxing, good kickboxing. I really like how he puts his punches together, throwing combinations. I have never really seen him just throw one kick or punch at a time. Likes that spinning back fist a lot. If you're a fan of back fist, you will be a fan of that. If you're not a fan of back fist, then you're not going to like that. But I notice he kind of hits it within a combo, so it's not like he just throws it in a wild sense. Something to look out for in this fight. Also, he's going to target the calf if you give it to him. And again, we know that style in the UFC is a style that is doing really well right now. So it's going to be very important to note when a fighter has that style in their game. Good movement around the ring, solid takedown, solid top control. Saw him able to defend against a jiu-jitsu type of fighter. I mean, if you look at his fight versus Davi Ramos, and a pretty well-rounded fighter, just overall pretty well-rounded, keeps up that pace for 15 minutes. I feel pretty good about him and his just overall ability. Two very young fighters. I think both of them are 24 years old, if I'm not mistaken. When I watched Nasrat, of course, a bit more of a Muay Thai fighter, shows a bit more of a boxing style in his stand-up, but Muay Thai by trade, so to speak. Pretty sharp southpaw. I mean, I like his counter punching. He likes to kind of stalk and control the pace. That's going to be interesting against a contrasting style in Arman, who kind of likes to move around. Because I do notice that Nasrat is able to cut the ring off pretty well. If you look at his last fight versus Alex Munoz was able to get him down. Now, of course, Munoz, we know, is going to strictly go for the wrestling, but Munoz was able to take him down early in that fight, had him against the cage at times, but Nasrat, of course, was able to get right back up, and I think by the second attempt, he was stuffing them all. So, close fight, two young fighters, two excited fighters. I think a good blueprint on how you beat Arman is by watching his fight versus Islam Makhachev. You have to be stronger than him, just have a bit more of an effective clinch, be able to take him down. Islam never really allowed Arman to keep him down. If Arman was to get Islam Makhachev down, never really allowed him to keep him down. He was able to get up every single time. And he kind of beat him in kind of a war of attrition, stopped the takedown, kind of overpower him and overstrength him in some ways. This one's interesting. And I'm gonna let me buy myself some time once again. Let me actually turn this to you. What do you notice from this fight? I don't know if you want to go with your pick right away. I will go with my pick after that. But what do you notice from this fight?
First thing I notice is that everyone has this Nasrat guy at 5'10". I don't know. I might be wrong. I'm probably wrong. Well, I don't think he's 5'10", man. He looks a lot shorter. Like, he looks a lot shorter than that. So that might be. I don't know. I gotta see the weigh-in, right? I gotta see the guys next to each other. I'm not sure Nasrat has a full 3 inches on Arman. I think he's taller by like maybe an inch and a half. But yeah, back to the fight. Looking at the fight, I think that the odds should be a lot closer. I think that the problem with Arman, he likes to stand up a lot. He likes to strike a lot. And I believe that Nasrat has a striking advantage. He looks for that kill shot. He looks to kill you, looks to knock you out. I like Arman in this fight because he's more well-rounded. He has more tools. I think if Arman watched the fight, Marcin held versus Nasrat Haqparast, if Arman watches that fight, he can do the exact same thing. He uses wrestling, and it was a clear 3-0 for Marcin held. Marcin held is a jiu-jitsu fighter with good takedowns. I believe Arman has better takedowns. Arman has ferocious takedowns. He drives into his takedowns, right? And if he does the exact same thing, like if he doesn't fall in love with the stand-up game, because he will have success standing up with Nasrat, but all Nasrat needs is one shot. I think Nasrat has the more power. But if he fights like Marcin held, uses his wrestling, I think he's going to win this fight because he has more weapons. All Nasrat really does is he uses his hands. He doesn't even throw the kicks. He usually punches. That's all he does. Well, Arman will punch, will kick, will take you down, so submit you. So he has way more ways to win this fight, way more paths. So I'm going to go with Arman to win this fight, but I believe he has to fight smart because the second he thinks he can go toe-to-toe with Nasrat, I think he's going to get put down. So if he fights smart, I like Arman to win this fight.
Yeah, I'm also leaning on the side of Arman, and the reason why I'm leaning on his side, to your point, Nasrat may have, I hesitate to say the better stand-up because I feel Arman has the more complete stand-up. But, Nasrat should be able to outstrike at times. But we've seen Nasrat be beaten on the feet. I mean, you watch his fight versus Drew Dober, who knocked him out. And that tells me, or at least that tells Arman that, hey, I can engage with this guy and he won't beat me. So, to your point, it really is going to depend on fighter IQ, game plan, strategy. Arman has more tools to implement, more of a path to victory. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Arman Tsarukyan as well. I tried the last name. I'm still not getting it. I'm going to go with Arman on this one. I'm leaning on his side. But to your point, this one should be a lot closer than both the odds and Tapology indicates. I mean, Tapology has it at 77% in favor of Arman. So closer than it looks. I'm gonna say that closer than it looks. Don't necessarily watch the odds on this one when making a decision, but I'm still going with Arman on this as well. Let's move it to Vegas in that case. Let's see what we have for our prelim fights. How do we want to do this? Do we want to give them one underdog and one golden, a couple goldens? What do we want to do?
Let's give them what do you feel are your confident picks here? What do you like? What are your golden picks?
Confident picks. Okay. Confident picks. It's hard to say because one of them, the odds are too big, right? Movsar Evloev, very confident in that pick. -500, I should be confident. So, no real value in me saying that there. And I really feel like this Khalil Rountree fight is set up for Khalil Rountree to win. Like I said, I think you need to pressure him or be aggressive to beat him. And Marcin Prachnio is not that. Although Rountree has a glaring weakness, to me, I just don't see how he loses this fight.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. My confident picks here. I like Evloev. I think that's a pretty good lock there to add on your parlay pieces. I also like to win this week. I like Khalil Rountree, but at the end of the day, Khalil is not the type of guy I like to lay that juice with. I like to save that for well-rounded fighters, but sake of the channel, I like Khalil Rountree. I think he's going to be able to put Marcin Prachnio away. I think he's going to have too much power. And I think Arman has a good team around him. I think he has Arman Tsarukyan. Okay, Arman Tsarukyan. I think he has a good team around him. I think they're going to let him know what he needs to be done here. Haqparast definitely can knock him out, but I like that Arman guy on a parlay piece with Evloev and Rountree. I think that's a good parlay. I like all three of those picks. Again, I know Nasrat has that pop, but I think Arman has a good team around him to let him know how easy this fight can be, and he can go 3 rounds. So Arman, Khalil, and I got Evloev.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid parlay for 3 fights that we feel really good about. $250 will return 546 on that, so almost a $300 return, all in the prelims. That sounds good to me. That sounds like a good parlay to me. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Do we have an underdog pick? I have one. My one, and I know you don't necessarily agree with it, but my one would be Amir Albazi, plus 100, straight double up there, bet 100, win 200 on that. I like Albazi in this fight.
Okay. For me, again, I picked Sara McMann in this fight, and I'm personally I'm not betting this fight. I told you I'm not putting any money on this fight, but if I have to pick an underdog, Julianna Peña is to me out of all the underdogs on the undercard, I think she has the best chance to win. Is my opinion.
There you go, 2 plus 100s as our underdog picks of the undercard. A solid parlay for 3 pretty confident picks that we have on this prelim card as well. Let's wrap it up at that. Of course, main card video coming up next, Poirier versus McGregor II, UFC 257. Let's make this money.
Get the bag.